Evening, everybody. Thanks for coming out to the Warrant Committee tonight. Nice to see everybody. I'm very excited to have a guest with us here tonight, Michael Dennehy, our new town administrator. We're going to meet him in just a second. Thanks for joining us. And then we're going to talk about the school committee. And before we talk about the school committee, I'm going to move two very short things up on the agenda to discuss our schedule and the document I sent out with the articles today. We won't have a long discussion on it. I just want to reference it because Steve's going to step out for the school committee discussion. So I wanted to do that before he leaves. Does anybody have any other questions or additions, changes to the agenda? Great. With regard to the minutes that Julia sent out for October 12th, does anybody have any further changes? Nope.
Motion to approve the minutes from September 12th.
Thanks.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Is unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay. Well, Mr. Dennehy, welcome to the Warrant Committee and welcome to Milton Town Government. We're so excited. I was thinking that maybe we would start with introducing ourselves and then we can lead up to you. And Maggie, do you mind just starting off by saying who you are and how long you've been on the Warrant Committee and anything else you'd like to say?
Maggie McAvini, this is my first year. So we're both going to be doing this together.
Great. Yeah. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
Rich Beeler, this is 4 years, I think.
Betty White, this is my third year.
Jean Ecker, this is my third year.
Jim Potter, also my third year.
Lee Michael McLean, my third year.
Brian Boatwright, second year.
Jonathan Boyden, second meeting.
Chuck Furby, this is my third year.
Steve McCurdy, this is my seventh.
Standing ovation.
Mike Mahalchik, this is my third year.
Lucinda Larson, this is my second meeting.
John Schindler, fourth year.
Very good. Very nice to meet you all. Thank you for having me here tonight. It's been a whirlwind 13 days. Today's my third Wednesday.
Wow.
First time in the Blue Room, so thank you for having me here.
Wonderful.
Obviously, some big goings on with school committee and their budget. I can't thank the town enough. I do get some strange looks from people in the town if I'm at Dunkin' Donuts or out at the rink and they're not really sure if I'm that guy. So to the audience, just approach me. I might have two girls hanging off my leg or 3 or 5 kids hanging off me. Just come approach me. I'm very approachable, but I can't thank the town enough, both the staff in the town and all the people in the committees and just the general public for welcoming me. It's been quite a tour. I've actually had violins playing for me, so.
Wonderful. That's great.
But it's been great, and I appreciate it. It's a lot of work. Some of my friends in city government have asked me how retirement is going, and I said, it's the complete opposite. It's something new every minute. And I can't thank Anne Marie and the Board of Selectmen enough. Chair Conlon, Selectman Burns, and Selectman Hurley have really helped me through the first 13 days and introduced me to a lot of nice people and starting to understand the process and procedure. Obviously, big step tonight towards May's town meeting, so.
Great.
Thank you for having me.
And with regard to Anne Marie, she certainly has the town hall humming at this point. So you're going to be getting the fire hose for a while, and we know that it's going to take you a little bit to get up to speed. You're coming in right as the budget is starting to come together for fiscal year 17, and we have a printing deadline, and you have new responsibilities as a new strong town administrator that Anne Marie never had. So it's an interesting time of change. And we look forward to working through all of that with you.
Yeah, that's great. So we worked on some stuff in city government that I think I can carry forward. I used to do a chief sheet to the mayor's chief of staff that worked very well. It told the mayor where we were and where we were going. That seems to be working very well with the Board of Selectmen, although I am a stronger town administrator through Chapter 5 stuff. It's working well. I need them, they need me, so communication's the key, and transparency and all the open public hearings do just that, so I appreciate it.
And we have you scheduled to come back in February with Amy and a couple of other folks to talk about the budgets under your purview.
Yep.
And we look forward to that.
Yeah, we're starting to collect some articles. If you saw the Board of Selectmen meeting on Monday, there's a lengthy list
I'm
coming.
going to put that up on the screen in
Yeah.
just a sec, yeah.
Yeah, so.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Dennehy or anything to say? No? Anybody want to grill him for a few minutes?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, do you have anything else for us?
No, I want to thank everyone here tonight. I'm Mike Dennehy, sorry I haven't met you. Yeah. Hi, how are you? Nice to meet you. And just, I'm here to work with you. I'm open door policy guy. And, you know, May should be a very busy time for the town. And look forward to working with each and every one of you and all the committees.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for coming in. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Are you going to stick around at all?
For a little bit.
Okay.
I got a hockey guy to go get. Yeah. It is, Town Hall is centrally located, so I have to thank the founding fathers. It's close enough to the rink and melodrama next door, so,
Awesome.
yeah.
Good.
But thank you very much.
Sure
I
thing. We
appreciate
look
it.
forward to working with you.
Thank you.
See you later. Okay, well, with regard to the agenda items that were going to appear after the school committee, I just wanted to point out that I sent out a huge email to you earlier today that you don't have to have read. It's just for your future. And it includes this long list of articles that are up for possible inclusion in the May annual town meeting. Not all of these will come to fruition, and there are some that I have heard about that aren't even on this list. So if a bunch of them come through, we could have a very, very busy February as we try to work through these non-financial articles that will appear at annual town meeting. So I wanted to make folks aware of those as they're moving through the process, and there's some other associated documents that on that email as well, the memos that Town Hall has received. And then lastly, I sent you a bunch more budgets. We don't have them all yet, and we don't have all the narratives yet, but we have a lot of them, and I got some questions about what you should be doing with those budgets. Folks who are new to the committee, it's going to be a process that I think you'll get your arms around as we have our first couple of budget reviews. Not necessarily the school committee because it's reviewed differently than the other budgets are, but once we get into the January meetings, you'll see that we spend a lot of time looking at change. What is different for the last 2 years and for the year coming up, and we want to look at the narratives and chat with the department heads about what drove those changes and what other unexpected things might be coming up or what isn't reflected in the budget, et cetera. So we look for that and clues in the narratives as to what we should investigate and ask questions about. And the subcommittee chairs at this point, as soon as you have your budget, you should feel free to reach out to the department head and make an appointment to go in and speak with them. And the new folks, you'll be hearing from your subcommittee chairs as to when those meetings are scheduled. If you're going to have a majority of your subcommittee, then that meeting should be posted, and Julia can help you to do that. Does anybody have any questions about that process? Well, as you saw in the schedule email that I sent out, we have all of the, save for the planning board, I think, all of the non-financial, all of the financial budget reviews scheduled in January and February, which I'm very excited about. Hopefully that schedule will stick. Sometimes things change and we can't avoid it, and sometimes it snows. But our next meeting will be on January 11th. We won't be meeting between now and then. And right now we're only planning on Wednesday meetings, January 11th through February 6th. Depending on how many of these non-financial articles are going to happen, we might need to add some Monday meetings, but hopefully we'll be able to accomplish all of them on Wednesday meetings after February 6th. I need to look at the bulk of the work that's there and then look at the printing schedule and try to see how that all fits in. And we also probably need to have the school committee back for a second time after we review the budget and digest it and the subcommittee is able to come up with their questions. Anybody have any questions about the schedule? No? All right, well then I'm going to invite the school committee up and Steve's going to excuse himself. I don't think I ended up with a binder. Did Mr. Dennehy take mine?
Here's one.
Oh, here's one. That's okay. Thank you.
I delivered one to Mr. Dennehy.
Okay. You check out. There's a little timer going on here. Let me just try to restart this again. Wouldn't you know that it's doing something, Glenn, now that it didn't do before? There you go. All right, well, thanks so much for joining us for probably the first of 2 meetings, I would assume. That's what we've done in the past. Looking forward to jumping in. I read a little bit about it in the Milton Times, but I'll wait to hear what you have to say.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to spend a little time with you talking about our budgets. I always like to start anytime I'm before the Warrant Committee by thanking each of you for the service that you give to the town. I am also a Warrant Committee alum, as is Dr. Pavlicek, so I know that the commitment that's required in terms of time and energy is significant, so thank you for that. I'd like to spend just a few minutes previewing the 2 budgets that we'd like to talk about. Some of you heard me say at town meeting that the state of the Milton Public Schools is very good. That's still true, even more so, and it's because of the support that we receive from the Warrant Committee and town meeting. Our seniors are being accepted at Ivy League universities. Just a few weeks ago, we had several athletes sign letters of intent with Division I schools. The range of programs that we offer rivals any independent school in town or in the metropolitan Boston area. And if we look at standardized test scores, the performance there is excellent. The performance on AP scores is excellent. So we've done 2 things for you this evening that we'd like to talk about. The first is a non-contingent budget, and that was built using the 5-year plan that we developed last year. The schools in the town, for the first time last year, developed a 5-year financial forecast. We took that very seriously and, in fact, looked at each line item and developed some assumptions about what types of inflationary growth we would see, what types of contractual obligations we would see there. And based on that foundation, we put together a non-contingent budget that we'll talk with you about tonight. The second budget, our Equity in Excellence budget, is our contingent request, and that process was even more rigorous, and I have all of my 5 school committee colleagues right behind me, but we went through a process with the superintendent and the leadership team to think about how we could sustain the excellence that we've been talking with you about and we've been so fortunate to realize over the last few years. And we looked at 3 categories: improving student achievement, expanding program opportunities, and reducing costs for parents and guardians. And in each of those areas, when we talked about priorities, we went through a rigorous process, and I think what you'll see in here tonight, I hope you'll be impressed with, because we think that that is what's required to continue to sustain this excellence. So I'm going to turn things over to our superintendent and our assistant superintendent for business. Certainly, after you've had a chance to hear what we have to say, we'll be happy to take any questions, and as Chair Lee Michael said, we would assume that we'll be back in a few weeks after you've had a chance to digest all this information. So thank you.
Maybe if we put in the middle. You can share.
Okay. You have a lot in front of you. We have a PowerPoint to try to elucidate some of the things that Chairman Walker said. And then after we do that, I'll give you a walk through all the backup for this that's in here, because you have a lot of detail behind this. But the PowerPoint's intended to be just sort of an overview of where we are, and then you can dig into the details. For those of you who've been here before, you'll recognize them. For those of you who are new to the committee, you'll say, where did all that come from? And how did it all get put together? So, but I'll take you through a little bit of that for the backup after we do the presentation. So, well, the vision, we always start with the vision of the public schools. And I won't read to you, but to build, strengthen a dynamic community that challenges all the students. And all of our priorities are consistent with the vision of the school system. So as Chairman Walker said, we have two budgets for you. First, a level service, our non-contingent budget, reflecting our anticipated cost of rolling the existing system forward, plus known obligations that we have. As you'll see, we have some increases in needs, particularly in special education, which are going to require a couple of additional positions, even in a level service budget. We're just, because of increases of enrollment in some places, increases in needs in others, there will be some new positions in the level service budget. We'll lay them out for you as we go. And again, as the chair mentioned, the excellence and equity budget is our contingent budget. Again, it's hard to call it a budget in the sense that we don't know for certain there will be an override or how much it would be and so forth, but these we just put together a list of the priorities that we think we need to really push the system forward. And certainly in any contingent budget, our priorities would be drawn from this list, and then we would work from there. But it's, that's a little more nebulous because of the early place in the process we are with respect to any potential override. And of course, now it's done.
You can just tell me next slide if you.
Oh, there
if you
it is.
get stuck.
All right, and as we said, the level service budget is based on the same assumptions as in the town's 5-year plan. New positions are either legal mandates or necessary for enrollment. Here's the bottom line. You see it's approximately a 6.5% increase in the budget. And we'll go through and look at this with the primarily salary, because our budget is primarily salary. In the salary lines, the reason for those increases in salaries fall into these 6 categories. Negotiated wage agreements, 3 new special education teachers, an additional adjustment counselor, an additional half-time speech pathologist, a 0.4 FTE English language learners teachers for students, for children whose first language is not English. This is a Massachusetts mandate that we have to deal with, and potentially 5 new special education aides. Those are the, in short, that's where this comes from.
When you say enrollment-based need, is that a projection or based on last year's enrollment?
For special education, it's based on what we know right now in terms of rolling up. As we can mention, we have a rapidly growing preschool population. We have several preschool programs, from all-day programs for children with more severe special needs, to a co-taught program for children with moderate special needs, to services for children with lesser special needs. We take children from 3 years old up. So we have a good rolling projection. When we come to the book later on, there is a section on this on enrollment projections that we are working with NASDAQ, which is the local enrollment projection group that we belong to. When we get there, I think you'll all be as scared as I am.
It's helpful to have those obligations called out. Thanks.
That's a question on your legal obligations on these special education and all your line items. Is this what you have now, or is this
These are additional.
an additional?
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
happens if it's not in the budget, if it's a legal obligation?
We have to cut something else.
I see.
And we'll come, there are slides that outline all of those as well. The non-salary lines for the roughly $500,000 in non-salary. Again, you'll see some themes here. Special education tuition. We spend net about $3 million a year on out-of-district special education tuition. That's for 50 children. And that's good because it used to be 100 children. I mean, we have a lot more programs in district that we keep children in the district. It's certainly better for them to be here than on a bus for 45 minutes to Marlboro or somewhere like that for a program, and it's cost-effective as well to keep them in district. But we still have a certain number of students whose needs are beyond our ability to service And this represents a 6% increase in special education tuition, which has been fairly average. Heat and utilities, we'll come to that again. We spend, heat and utilities is approximately $1 million a year. This will outline later on. Our bus contracts, our regular bus contract for the big yellow buses is up for rebid this year. So we have a contingent number in here to try to figure out where that's likely to come in. We spent this year $660,000 on regular school buses. And on special education school buses, we spend $1 million a year on the little buses. So this reflects a modest increase, actually, in bus prices. And we'll go through the custodial maintenance costs, text materials, instructional supplies, technology, all smaller numbers. But we'll come back and look at those. Yes?
The transportation's in addition to the $3 million that we spend in other district.
Yes, $3 million is just tuition. Another $1 million for out-of-district and in-district transportation for special education. Negotiated wage agreements. I'm calling one piece out in here. At 1.8, you say 5%. How could that possibly be that you have 5% increase in your wage agreements? One of the issues in here has to do with the way special education aids are funded, and those of you who were here last year will remember this when I said it. We get about $1.3 million a year in IDEA grants from the federal government. That used to cover all of our special education aids. This year, current year, our special education aids cost us about $1.6 million. Next year, it's going to be $350,000, more than that. As far as the general fund's concerned, that's a doubling of our obligation. It's not really, because if you look at the whole picture, it is still a significant increase over our special education aid costs. But as for the part that's actually funded from the taxpayer, the grant from the state hasn't gone up in years, appreciably. And so it looks like it's, with the special education aids, when you see the call out later on in the charts, it looks like it's like a 97% increase. How on earth could that be? Well, that's just our portion of it has gone up by roughly 97%. If you take the special education aids out of the picture for a moment, it's about a 4.3% raise in negotiated wage agreements, which represents 2% cost of living and a variety of steps and lanes that occur in the various different contracts. And about 2+% for steps and lanes has been average for the last number of years, since I sat where Michael was.
Could you please explain what a step versus a lane is?
In step is, for instance, for our teacher's contract, it's based on your number of years of service. So you're step 7, you've had 7 years of service. Next year, you'll be step 8. You'll move up for a while, and then it freezes. A lane, there are 5 lanes in the contract. They represent levels of education. If you have a bachelor's, you're on one lane. If you have a bachelor's plus 30 or a master's, you go up to another lane. A master's plus 30 credits or 45 credits, you go to a third. We actually have 5 lanes in the teacher's contract, representing different levels of education. So it's the teaching equivalent of a promotion, basically, because you've earned a further degree. There are no, unlike in some jobs where you start at different levels and can be promoted. Teachers are never promoted. They're always teachers. But they go up different steps for lengths of service and lanes representing levels of education.
So to Dr. Asher's point, we can send, first of all, good evening, everyone. And when we started, I said, I'm always afraid these two are going to go on your side of the table because it's like going to a holiday meal. They liked their warrant committee days. To Dr. Asher's question, we'll have the contract sent to you, and people often ask, and the setup of steps and lanes is the same in every public school district in the state. Obviously, the numbers are different across the state, but I think it'll be valuable for all of you to look at that chart. Thank you. I'm going to address special education. I had mentioned to Chairman Walker that one of, I always consider this like a final exam, so we really prepare for this, but one of the most beneficial meetings we had as we run through this was to do a tutorial for anyone who wanted it on special education. And we bring our special education director, and so if you want to schedule that at any time, it would be valuable. Glenn referred to aides, paraprofessionals, and you had referred, Ms. McAvaney, to contracts. So in the world of special education, in our world, when children turn 2.8 months, if their doctor or their family feels that that child might have a special education need, they can be tested. And so in my history in the Milton Public School, there was one preschool class. We now have 7 preschool classes. Some of the children come 4 mornings, some of the children come all day, every day, based on their needs. So they're evaluated. I had a meeting with the principals yesterday, and they said they had 3 meetings this week, and they screened the children out. And one of our principals said, I remember when my child was screened out, I wanted those special ed services. So, but many of the children, and we have a very successful preschool and special ed program, so that, you know, I remember somebody once called me and said, I have a child with these kind of needs, where should I move in Massachusetts? So we have a very, very strong special ed program. And what happened as a result of the school building project, we had 100 children in out-of-district placement. So if you have a child with special needs and you come and we can't offer that program, you have a right under the law to go out and find another program. We might suggest a program. So as a result of the school building project, the will of this town and the Warrant Committee, I give total credit to, we have built programs internally. So to a parent, they want their children, parent and guardian, in the district. They don't want them on these school buses going to these special ed schools. And so we had, a few short years ago, 100 children in out-of-district placements. And now we meet every 2 weeks to watch. We know the names of the children who are aging out. We know the names of the children who are coming up. We have a watch list of children. And so we watch these special ed numbers. But when you look at these numbers, you ask the correct question to start the whole night. To me, these are legal contracts. And to the point, when you said, what if you don't have the funds, then we have to cut from regular education, which with the which when you look at the, did we put the class size enrollment chart in? When we send you the contract, we'll send you the enrollment chart, and you'll see I can't cut a first grade and take the rest of the children and divide them among the other first grades. So in this special education, why these differences, and why do we almost say that this budget is driven by special education? The range of offerings, I'm not going to read you, to keep students in district. We have built programs. We had a special education under the law. You have to evaluate your special ed program. You may have followed it last year, a $42,000 study that really is a roadmap for the next 5 years in special education. And our numbers are comparable across the state, but we do have more and more children coming and enrolling in the schools with severe special needs issues. So at the Glover School, for example, we run a program for children who have emotional issues. And so we taught her every single day and week that some of those children could be out of district, and then some of these children, we can provide the right services so that they'll thrive in the public school district. But at every level, we have programs for children with emotional issues, we have programs for children with developmental delays, and then the prior superintendent, Dr. Jaffoon, created a program, a co-taught program. It's housed at the Glover, and there are 3 classes at the Tucker. Again, 80% of these children would be out of district, but we have created this co-taught program. There are 2 teachers in the room, 1 teacher with special education background and a regular ed teacher. We keep by law, you have to have 1 more role model, a regular ed child, general ed child, then children with special needs. But all of these children, 80% of them could be out of district. And some of you might remember the press when we started this program. There was a lot of questions about it. I know a parent who had children at the Glover and 3 children, and she said 3 of the 6 years I request for my child to be in the co-taught. 18 children, 2 teachers, and an empathy for children with special needs that you have the rest of your life. So these special ed programs are really integral in the Milton Public Schools. Substantially separate partial inclusion classes for students with more severe or behavioral issues, these co-taught programs that I just explained to you, and Chairman Walker serves on the committee. Once a month, we have teachers and parents, and any of you would be invited to attend one of the meetings, who meet, and the goal of the district is inclusion. So when I go into one of these co-taught rooms, the success is if you can't tell who the child is with a special need, and I'm finishing your sentence, we're both up teaching, we don't need somebody who's not involved in the program. So again, we can give you an overview of special education at another time, but this special education, the legal aspect of special education is really driving the system, and we have to monitor from the transportation to the children out of district to what if all of a sudden, the next question you should ask is, a child moves in and you don't have enough speech therapists, and I get the IEP from another district that says this child has to have so many sessions a week of speech. That, to the magnitude of a special program. And we're very different from the Milton of years ago, and a lot of our neighboring communities, children are enrolling into Milton Public Schools daily and weekly, and Glenn can tell you, because he works on the placement. And so, say in some communities, the child you go to kindergarten with is the child you graduate with, but in the Milton Public Schools, we have enrollment every week, all through the school year.
Wow.
Somebody had a question. Dr.
I
Asher.
think the special ed budget, if I'm right, is about 27% of the school budget, is that right? And what percentage of students does that address, and what percentage of those are full-time in that, and what take a more part-time role?
We have 670 students as of a few days ago on individual ed programs. And we have just over 4,000 students in the system. You're looking at about 16%, 15 to 16%, which is fairly common for communities like ours in Massachusetts. So about 15 to 16% of our students have special needs of some form. And in the back of this, there is actually a pie chart breaking out the special ed budget. But yes, it's on that order of magnitude for sure.
But you could never average it, because you might have 2 sessions of speech a week, and I might be in a totally separate class that has 3 teachers and 9 children by the profile. But it's a great question. Thank you.
Superintendent Gorman, approximately how many students are out of district now?
50.
50. Oh, so you've
Under
cut it
50.
in half. That's good.
But
50.
I have to tell you, the fascinating part about special education, it changes daily or weekly. And so these IEPs don't happen, and now we start school. These IEPs happen every day of the week and all through the school year, and the children who move into the district come with IEPs. Somebody behind me had something to say?
No.
Richard.
Just a quick question.
Colin.
Now that you're building the programs and kids are staying within district, are we bringing people from other districts into
No,
these programs?
not currently.
Not currently.
Oh, that's a great...
I remember a couple of years
That's
ago,
a
you
great
guys-
question. We had one...
We had one a few years ago.
Okay.
We don't.
Okay.
So what Mr. Bowler's talking about, if we have a program for elementary children with emotional issues, could children from neighboring communities tuition in? And we did do that at one point, and we had one tuition in. I will tell you that those programs inside are almost running at capacity, too.
Oh.
And the thing is, about this special education and the tutorial, the head nurse eloquently refers to it, it's wraparound services. So it isn't one teacher, it's school psychologists, school psychiatrists, speech, occupational therapy, again, to meet the legal responsibilities. The budget differences, these positions, we've already gone over this, are mandated. There's no special education.
Hey, Michael, can you, being fussy, here it is. Oh, you're back, you're too far ahead.
This one?
Back
Page
one
10.
more. There. Jumping on us from here.
So somebody asked a great question. As I said to you, we know who's going to age out, we know who's coming in, but you could also say to me, well, how can you anticipate the sped positions if you don't know what the IEPs are saying? We look historically, we look at what we need now. There's no sped position that we don't need. They're all based on IEPs. Right now, the sped director knows that her speech therapists are working at maximum. Additional co-taught classrooms needed in grades 2 through 4.
Just 2 and 4.
2 and 4. We know who's coming up from 1 and 3, and so anticipating the need for those to turn into COTAC classroom based on their IEPs. Special education required at high school. This is solely based on who's here and who we know is coming from the 8th grade to the 9th grade next year, and the SPED director went over all of the schedules, and this is what she says that we'll need next year. And then Glenn gave you an estimate of what we hire staff at. Adjustment counselor, I think, did you ask before the meeting began about adjustment counselors? So adjustment counselors, in our kind of world, we had some of us guidance counselors, and so at the high school, a guidance counselor today works with students to, the day they come to high school, before they come to high school, to come up with their schedule, issues around school, and it's really a new world. When you hit 9th grade, you start preparing for college, and you start that process. And so these guidance counselors work with, and I'll tell you, by the accrediting agency, we're right at the limit. We don't have an extra guidance counselor, or they often say to me, 1 through, I can give you the quote of how many guidance counselors we have and what the basis is. Our guidance counselors do a lot of work that's really beyond their skill set by these adjustment counselors. So these adjustment counselors, Betty could probably do this better than I could. These adjustment counselors have specialized degrees, and in many of these special education plans, these children have to see adjustment counselors, and they have, the adjustment counselors have skills that are therapeutic and for children with social emotional issues. And we have come to the point now that these adjustment counselors, again, you're not on an IEP, but everything from death in the family to tragedy in the family to divorce in the family, these adjustment counselors work. And what's happened is the children on IEPs, that's who they have to see first. And so currently we have 1.5 adjustment counselors at the middle and 2.0 FTEs at the high school. These counselors, as I say, serve as children with special needs on individual plans, and we've outlined for you really how much of their time is taken up by the IEPs. And because of this, children who need them every day, that need is really being curtailed. The other day, we had if you revert back to your high school days, we had a very active day last Friday at Milton High School, and our adjustment counselors were involved all day. And I said to the administration, you did a fabulous job today with 1,000 high schoolers, and and they said the adjustment counselors. So the needs of some students require, I don't have that set of skills that adjustment counselor has. And so I prefaced and wrote down here that when we come, I often say that this town is, I think more than any other community in the state, it's schools. And so we were voted one of the best communities. Chronicle is going to do a spot, so they came and interviewed the schools and every other organization in town. And the reporter said, it sounds like you're in competition with the parochial and private schools. I said, oh, I am. I said, I am. And she said, and I've been told other people don't do that. But we want, if any family chooses not to go to the Milton Public Schools, we don't want it to be for I can't offer you a single-sex education. I can't offer you a Catholic education. I can't offer you the beginning of your triple eagle experience. But I can, I don't want anybody to leave for a better educational program. And so we are very, very competitive, and we're in competition. And what we ask for is really driven by the needs of the students, and we have 4,000 and growing. Sheila Varela and Leroy Walker, they're meeting with us, and the statistics and what's happening in the enrollment should make you very proud that people are moving, and they're moving here with their children.
Proud and concerned.
And so, again, these adjustment counselors, and then the other part that we should add to this, there is one adjustment counselor at each elementary school. But we have an issue at one of our larger elementary schools, and we're going to take some time from an adjustment counselor at another school. So you should know that whenever we can share, this sharing we've done over the years, if we have one employee, we might assign them to 2 schools, but that's really difficult because, to me, I'm wasting time when they're in the car that they could service another child. And so, but then again, if you hire a half-time person, they're looking for a full-time position. So you always weigh, if they're traveling to 2 schools, am I missing out on that time? But these adjustment counselors have been very effective, the one that shares between the middle and high, because these are the kind of people that know the families, know the issues that our families are facing, and can bring, well, I know what's happening at the middle school with that family. So that's the adjustment counselor explanation. The .5 speech pathologist. This speech pathology need, we currently have 7 speech pathologists in the district. This is a need that's really large at the preschool. In my regular education background, I would say speech is one of the areas of special education. A lot of the disabilities, you have to learn how to work around and get the skill set, but many speech issues can be solved through speech therapists. And if you identify a child who's young, you can really solve those speech needs. So we need another .5 speech pathologist. I'll tell you that need is being watched now very closely. The caseload, obviously, you understand, half-time, and this is not anything beyond, to your point, what's required by an IEP and a schedule. And you should know, as the people in charge, if somebody, when they're asked for a speech pathologist, we go over every single schedule by this contract that you'll see. We know how many hours they can work. We know what their breaks have to be. We know what the maximum number of children they can service. I'll often say, don't you think you could put those children together? But if their IEPs say one-on-one, and another IEP might say they can be in a small group. So we comb those schedules very carefully. So that's the need behind the .5 speech therapist.
Superintendent Burley? I just wanted to ask a follow-up question about that caseload. I was wondering what your benchmarks were, how you determine what the caseload is, but it sounds like a lot of it is driven by the IEP.
It is, and the IEP can be, Glenn Pavlicek needs 5 times 30 individual because he has an extreme need, but Mary Gormley can be in 3 times 30 in a small group of 4 or 5.
5
kind of
times 30 means 30
minutes.
minutes, five days a week.
So it's
We
all
talk about
driven,
that
it's
sometimes.
all driven by the IEPs. Collycott Cunningham facilitates us that sometimes we can group the children together. But, again, if I was you, I would ask, well, how does, one school fit in? But we would put somebody at .8 at a school, and then we would move them, the other .2 of their schedule, to another school. So we comb over every single schedule. And those schedules are created with the principals and the SPED director.
Thank you.
Can I ask one quick question?
Anything.
I noticed on the budgets that you're always estimating at the masters the highest, step 5. Is there a reason for that? Are you always hiring someone at that level?
Good question.
Master's degree is the middle lane. To get a license in Massachusetts, a professional license, you need a master's degree, so people have to get there. Step 5 represents someone with 5 years of experience. We hire people of all levels of experience. We don't just hire newbies straight out of college who might be a step 1. We hire some people from other districts who might be step 6, 7. Master's 5 is just a reasonable average starting
So if the money is approved for these salaries, say at a step 5, and you're not using, what happens with the excess money that was approved in the budget? Do you?
We never have excess money.
Oh, that's too bad.
You're asking a really good question.
You can't move it, huh?
This is from,
We can.
so this is from
We are
Glenn's
unlike the
experience.
other departments in that schools by law have a bottom line budget.
Okay.
So we have the luxury of a certain amount of flexibility within our budget that other town departments don't have. When they said, you have X for salary and Y for equipment, they're stuck with that.
Okay.
But we are
So,
more fungible.
But it's like we gave you these questions, but we have 500 employees, so you bring up an excellent point. We, Glenn, all of us, we underfund our substitute budget. So 3 years ago, we had 35 pregnancies. That means teachers are out from 8 to 10 weeks. We don't put money in, we have a sub-budget for when people, historically. And so, but then the next year, we might not have that many long-term leaves. We have people out on leave. And so, but I have to tell you that I hope this town takes a lot of pride in that we don't say to the colleague card, you have this amount of money and you're hiring 5 teachers. They do a tremendous amount of interviewing. We do all the reference checks. Probably when I want you to ask a Milton Public School teacher how many people interviewed them before they're hired, and then we pay them for their experience and their degrees. I've hired people who said, I had to leave this community because they paid me for 1 of every 4 years. Well, would you go to a doctor or a lawyer? That, I'm going to go because they're only paying him for, so, but we ask a tremendous amount of our teachers. And for me, as the school superintendent, we have a very high expectations, and if it's not a match, we let teachers go. And there are 360 other communities they can work for, but if you don't give more than 100% in this community, you're going to work in another community. But in return, this community values you, and we don't pay anybody. They have to prove to us the degree level. If somebody's coming from another community and they say, I'm B4, I get it documented from the prior district. We go over and sealed all of their degree levels. And so this issue about salary, I think it's a good message. It's a good message to the parents and guardians of the children in the district. We don't say, oh, well, this year you have to hire all B1s, so you understand what a B1 is. So you have to hire B1s. We hire the people who are the strongest candidates. And if you're on a team of 3 third-grade teachers, what are you going to bring to that team? We know, and often teachers are on the teams that do the interviewing. The next, this ELL, this could be another tutorial, Lee Michael. So you'll see now English language learners, ELE, ELL. These are children who their home language is not English. These are children who, again, there are state and federal tests, and a child comes in and their family identifies as English not being the language in their home. These children, every child who the parent identifies has to be tested. And these children are tested, and the range of options for them is sort of like special education. Some of these children, by law, DESE regulations, I have to give them 2.5 hours of one-on-one English instruction a day. Other children might have 4 45-minute sessions a day. And then when these children continually tested, and when their English meets the level that DESE and the Department of Education deems appropriate, you have to watch these children for 2 or 3 years and periodically check in with them. And so I have to tell you, a few short years ago, for those, who was here on the longest? Oh, he stepped out.
Steve.
We had really in the 20s and the teens, and our number is now hovering ELE, approximately 90 children. And so by watching the Globe and the press, the number of children who English is not their native language. And I would tell you, the Department of Education goes into every school district every 6 years. We had them last week. You prepare for this study for 1 year. They go over all of your records. They evaluate your special ed program, your ELL program, and all your civil rights procedures. And when they came 6 years ago, they said to me, listen, just put all the ELL children in one school because you're never going to be able to, this is really demanding. But then that's hard because you move into the Tucker district, and I'm saying, if you're any other child, I'm not saying to you, well, the ELL is at the Collycott. But what we've tried to do is do some kind of groupings. But when somebody comes into a neighborhood, as you know, they want to go to their neighborhood school. But we're working on this program, and we've had to increase staff, and we anticipate, they're telling me now that we're at a borderline, and it's only mid-December, servicing these children. But what we do when children move in is Glenn, what was the last move-in? A week ago with?
Grade 2 and 4.
With children
was
who are
3 days ago.
going to require ELL certified. So this services. So this is not special education. These are children who do not speak English, and this is all. This is not. We don't think they speak English well enough. This is all standardized testing that they're administered by certified ELL teachers. Services in ELL. Currently, we have 3.8 teachers in the district. Their caseload, and this is mandated by law. When Glenn referred to the special education aides or paraprofessionals, these paraprofessionals or aides are really a part of this IEP. So a child who needs is beyond he or she being independent in the school, their IEP might require that they need a paraprofessional, a one-on-one all day, or sometimes their IEP might require that a paraprofessional has to be in the room. And so we closely monitor this number of paraprofessionals, because the issue is that this is continual as these individual plans are written. We try, if it's a classroom, we try to assign children to the same classroom, work with their parents so that we have one paraprofessional in the room. But many of these children's needs, physical and emotional needs, require that they have to, in addition to having their special ed services, have a paraprofessional with them all the time, all through the school day. Lynn?
And so in the non-salary lines, I referred to this briefly earlier on, and I'll just sort of reiterate. The bulk of it is in the first couple lines there: special education tuition for those out-of-district students, heat and utilities, our estimates of what it's going to cost for the bus contracts for next year, and increasing custodial maintenance costs. And I'll have some backup for those as we go along. Yes?
Refresh my memory on heat. So we get it last year, we got this new contract, and it saved us money, and
Yep.
Yeah.
so, can you,
I have some backup here. I'll go through it later on with you.
No
because we
problem.
have
Right.
I have the backup where all these numbers are coming from.
got it.
Yes, we did sign a new, we locked in some rates on electricity that were effective. They're actually coming into effect in January. So it's for half of it for this year, and then locks in for another half year after that. That Bill Ritchie locked in for the town. So that's a savings on electricity. The larger part, as you'll see, is natural gas for heating the systems. But utilities refer to heating, electricity, natural gas, water, and now stormwater. So, as you can see here, the other pieces are small, but they back up further on. So just the differences here in terms of this budget. Again, for those new to the layout, our budget is laid out according to standards by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. We have 7 major categories that we have to budget all of our things into: policy and administration, which is the school committee, leadership, and so forth; and instructional leadership, which is your principals and curriculum coordinators; instruction, which is the teachers; instructional services are things like regular education aides, it's your nursing program, athletics, clubs, activities, all those different things that support instruction. And again, that's laid out in further sections. Special education is called out separately. Technology and facilities. These are the 7 major DESI categories that we have to break everything down in. And as you'll see later on, it's the reason we break our budget out the way we do, is because we have to report it that way at the end of the year. Again, this is just a reiteration that we're looking for this budget to move from 43.6 to 46.3 million dollars out of the general fund. And just final slide to go back to where the money gets spent. Instruction, those 7 major categories, as you can see, instruction and special education together are regular ed and special ed, 74%. And when you get into instructional services, you're over 80%. That's why we promised in there 80-some% personnel. This is really where the money goes. It's being thumped.
Pretty far away.
Yeah, well, should get batteries, they should work. As for this,
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
73% between instruction and special education. Can you benchmark that a little bit for us? Is that where you'd like to be? What is a reasonable range, just so we have some?
I think that's fairly common for a lot of districts. I mean, you go to almost any public school district, and they'll tell you they're, 85% personnel. And, as I say, we're at 16% special education. We're pretty average for our comparable districts in terms of number of students. And actually, I would say that in many ways, our costs are better than a lot of districts because we keep students in district as opposed to sending them out. So in terms of dollars, I think we do well.
Thank you.
So as Chairman Walker mentioned, in the course of looking at what sort of items we would need in order to really push the system forward, and we'll thank Karen Spaulding at the middle school for the title Equity and Excellence. It was her little phrase. I think it's a nice one. We really looked at, the school committee looked at three major themes: improving achievement, expanding opportunities, and reducing cost to parents and guardians. And so the items that are on the next several slides are in no particular order within those categories because they are, they're items that we think are important. And certainly, if you're going to say that we're entitled to $1.895 million in a contingent budget, this is what they would be, but we're a little premature to be saying things like that yet. So these are the items that the school committee deemed important, as I say, in no prioritized order within these categories, but they are just items from which a contingent budget will likely ultimately come.
Do you remember what the Warrant Committee approved for the contingent budget last year for the schools? Off the top of your head.
No. Do you remember?
I can look it up later.
Yeah.
The categories, are they in order?
Sorry?
Are the categories in order of?
No. Oh, no. Nothing in
No
this
order.
section is in order. By blanket caveat.
It's not, you're gonna find a cough drop.
Want a cough drop?
Just a little bit of context. The exercise that we went through is we're in a unique position. We started to talk about the advancement budget with you guys about 5 years ago now. And at that time, there were some significant issues that needed to be fixed. Now, we're in a slightly different and actually better position, which is that we have excellence that we need to sustain. There are still some small segments of the Milton Public Schools family that aren't progressing quite at the pace that we would like. But overall, what we're saying is that we have a system where we're demonstrating excellence. So the unique challenge that we have is how do we sustain that excellence and at the same time focus on the segments of the population that we need to bring up. So we don't want to lose the excellence that we have. We don't want to reduce any programs. We don't want to reduce the broad range of programs that we have to offer. But how do we also target those individuals that we have this contract with? The contract is with every Milton Public School student and parent that they will get the best education they possibly can. So this budget is an attempt to address that question. And I would say we're not early in talking about this, and it's not premature to talk about this. We're actually on schedule. The budget schedule's a little behind. So we're on time and we're on target. We're hoping that our leadership can catch up. Because frankly, at this point, this is December. As you well know, the budgets are all supposed to be into you on or about December 1st. So this is absolutely the perfect time to talk about not only non-contingent budgets, but a contingent budget. And further, we'll need to make that decision very soon. So I'm pleased to say that Chairman McLean and I have twice invited the selectmen to a joint meeting, which we hope they'll join us for in early January. But we think it is the appropriate time to talk about the contingent budget requirements that the town has and what the taxpayers will get if, in fact, they approve a contingent budget on override.
So to that point, the school committee has by law these site councils. The site councils are a group of parents at each school that are like a governance board. This year, the school committee had the site councils in before we presented this budget, and one of their responsibilities is to review the school budget. And so when you look at these positions, I watch Chairman Walker as we meet every Tuesday morning, and anybody is invited to this public meeting with the Finance Subcommittee. We work on this budget. And I think it's important to tell the public and you that we meet with the full leadership team, 30 vice principals, principals, and coordinators. And so this, I call it a budget from the bottom up. And so they come forward, and the list obviously is extensive from every one of the disciplines. And then we meet with the principals and the special ed director and the individuals. I should have started this by saying Janet Sheehan, our assistant superintendent for curriculum, would be here, but she's a grandmother for the second time, and the baby went out, and we had to convince her to stay home and not come here. But we meet as a leadership team, and we develop this budget. So I often say that the high school principal could come tonight and give this presentation. So I don't say, oh, you elementary people leave and come back and tell me what you want in the middle. Everybody knows the needs of the district. They understand it, and we present it. And then we now will go out to each of the PTOs, and we will give this same presentation. And then we get their feedback, we hear how they feel, and and it's really under this school committee and the prior school committee that they really build support for the school budget that I had never seen before. So as we look at these, to Mr. Bowler's point, improving student achievement, one elementary math specialist at each school. So I charge you to call your relatives and friends in other communities. Through the advancement budget that you funded, we hired reading teachers. And every school district had elementary reading teachers, and we didn't. And those reading teachers have contributed to improving student achievement. And there's a page in my evaluation that I'll add it to my list to send to you tomorrow. It's interesting. We've made progress in reading at the elementary. And in math, we didn't make the progress that we really should have made. Now, it's not just going to be these math specialists, but it's very interesting. If you reflect, the elementary teacher has to be a specialist in teaching English, reading, math, science, and social studies. You know from your children in elementary school and going to elementary school. Then you go to middle school, and you're the math specialist, and you're the social studies teacher, and you're the science teacher. So these specialists really help to drive the achievement at the elementary school. They work with teachers, they critique teachers, they work with small groups of children. And I'll send you this sheet tomorrow that, using the state data and our data specialist, how we made progress and we moved ahead with the reading specialists, and these math specialists will help drive achievement at the elementary school. We don't have any math specialists at the elementary level now. This would be one math specialist at each of the elementary schools. I talked to you about these co-taught classes. We really don't cap them, they're driven by the need. We keep them lower than the regular ed numbers, which when I give you the enrollment sheet, you'll see our suggested caps at each grade level. We've had, the school committee has heard, we've heard from the CPAC, the parents of children with special needs, that at grades 1, 2, and 3, it's one regular ed teacher, general ed teacher, and one sped teacher. And then at grades 4 and 5, it's the sped teacher's only in the room 50% of the time. And we're finding that their ed plans really require more time, and the parents of the children in the program and the special education individuals have told us that those teachers should really be at grades 4 and 5 full-time. This has been an issue that's been in our budget over the past years, and the individual site councils and the CPAC have brought it forward. For the district, that would mean 2 full-time teachers. Purchase comprehensive balanced literacy curriculum. One of our advancement initiatives was reading at grade level at the end of grade 3. We haven't achieved that for all of our children. We're looking at our K-1-2 program, our literacy program. We're working with this Dr. Nani Lasso, who is really one of the foremost experts, in the country. And on the phone with her the other day, she said, every school district has, she used the word pivot, every 3 to 5 years and look at their reading program. So when you ask 4,000 children, 2,000 children at the elementary school, in my history in the Milton Public Schools, you would buy the New English program at the elementary, you'd get it one, so your child missed out, he's in second grade. We'd buy it first, and then the next year second. So that advancement budget enabled us, we saw unbelievable progress in science because we bought the science materials. And at the middle and high school and at the elementary, you'll see we need the 1-2, K1 or 1-2 in science, but these comprehensive literacy-based, this is language arts, and this is working with children at K1 and 2, and we need $80,000. And in our text materials and supplies line, it would be interesting, Glenn, if we gave them a comparison. And it's hard to compare because some districts put their technology in, but if it wasn't for the PTOs, a PTO raises $40,000 a year, and the MFE gives the Milton Public Schools money, but I go to those MFE meetings. They are not assuming the responsibility of the taxpayer. And so I sit there, and they are in creation to enhance the program. So they give out mini grants. What they want to do is they want to enhance the educational program, and the PTOs do not want to take over the role of the taxpayer. So I go to the MFE board meetings, MFE members here, they don't want to buy the textbooks. They'll buy the Star Lab, which is an enhancement. They'll buy, the other night we went, Google, these Google programs. They'll buy things that, again, our Milton Public School budget would never be able to fund. But this $80,000 is really essential. And then improving student achievement, this vice principal. This has been an issue. If you know anybody with any parent or guardian with a child at the middle school or was at the middle school, we reduced the vice principal position and we made it dean. So this would be an addition of $20,000. And you might say, why did you put that under driving student achievement? Because unless the person is a vice principal, they can't do the evaluation of the teachers. And the evaluation and the supervision of the teachers drives teachers' improvement, which drives student achievement. And so we've worked with the dean. It's very successful, but the dean cannot go in and evaluate. The dean has worked with the children. So we would take the dean position and turn it back into a vice principal. And for a middle school of 1,000 children, we should have 2 vice principals. We have 2 vice principals at the high school. And right now, we have a vice principal and a dean at the middle school.
So would you be giving a teacher a $20,000 raise?
No,
to do
I would
that?
take the dean, who, the dean is, it's a great question, is in the Unit A, the teacher contract. The teacher contract. And then we have a Unit B, which when we send you the contracts, that's all of the coordinators, all of the, I call them middle management administrators, all the assistant principals are in that Unit B. So I would take somebody, the dean, and we, if again, this is all, is he certified, does he want the administrative position? We're not saying that it would be his position, but we would eliminate the dean, because all of the dean's roles and responsibilities are really that of the vice principal, in addition to doing the evaluation and supervision. That's really a huge part that's missing. And when you don't have it, then that falls on the principal and the one other vice principal and, the language arts coordinator, the math coordinator.
Okay, so one of the deans would have a $20,000 raise to become a vice principal.
Right. Complete job description change, but again, we wouldn't keep a dean. That's why you see the $20,000. We wouldn't keep a dean and then hire a vice principal. And if you stopped anybody, Sheila Varela probably could do this a lot better. Again, if you had children in the middle school, again, they have to be complimented, the work they do. But the middle school is, they smile about middle school.
I got 2.
Yeah, so you understand.
It's a special place to be.
So, again, this is a position that's important. I can't speak for the individuals behind me, but they put it forward, and they've listened to the PTO. And again, you might say $20,000, but when we get to fees, somebody said to me, how'd you let fees get that high? Well, when we sit down and it's 40 teacher or fees, I'm part of the problem, that I said, well, we'll raise those fees $25 more, so we'll keep that teacher in the third grade. So all of a sudden, you look in the mirror, and you have fees that are keeping children out of athletics, which correlate to increased achievement at high school. And so, you know, in my world, the bellwether, every $60,000 to me is another teacher. And so if we find ways to keep one more teacher, that's the language I talk to them about. And so people talk about administrators, but, you know, that we should do a comparison. And, you know, we watch very, very closely. And I'll tell you a story that I don't even think I told the school committee. Some of the administrators teach and some don't. It's all by the contract. And our vice principal at the high school saw a need because of the enrollment in physics, and he is an outstanding math teacher, and he stepped up and he took on that responsibility to teach physics. Now, we're on TV, but that's really above and beyond. You know, in a lot of worlds, they would have said, that's really a 1.2. He's doing his job, and during the day, he's teaching the physics class. And so you can't do that permanently. He did it for 1 year. The enrollment turned out to be that in August, and who's the winner? The children win. So, but that's really.
One brief thing, Mary, on this, too. In what we've been hearing for both the site council and just parents in general is that.
Sheila, run up to the table.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, excuse me.
Okay. Is that not being able to have the administrators, we're lacking in the administrative level, because, like right now, for instance, Karen Spalding has to do all the teacher reviews in the entire school, right? Because the dean is not in the unit, and you know, to be able to do that. And so when there's issues with teachers, or there's, you know, problems in the classroom, you know, one person cannot do the entire Pierce Middle School. And even, you know, it's definitely an issue that we keep on hearing, that there's not enough administration to be able to sometimes be in the classroom, to evaluate, to go in, to see, to mentor. And that's a big issue, because, as Mary said, it's always the teacher in the classroom, and then the administration gets stretched and stretched and stretched. So that's a big issue that I personally hear from the parent community, and definitely the site councils, when they report it on to us, definitely an issue. So, okay, thanks.
And tomorrow, when we do our list, sending you the information, I'll send you the PCG study from last year. And as you can see, their recommendation was to take this grades 4 and 5, this co-taught, and make the teachers full-time rather than 50%. And again, they need the services, whether it's full-time in the classroom or not. Next, the equity in the classroom budget, continuing improving student achievement, new Spanish text for the middle school. Again, if we don't get this $20,000 purchase for their bottom line in text materials and supplies, they wouldn't buy the entire purchase of the Spanish text in 1 year. They would roll it over 3 years. So you're in the 8th grade, you're in the 7th grade, you're going to miss out. The transitions program at Milton High School for students returning from medical and emotional issues, 1.5 FTE. This is an issue that a school committee member who went to one of the conferences, school committee members brought up, and then it was picked up by the high school principal and the head of guidance. So children who are out of school, 1,000 high school students with in hospital or have emotional issues, again, the goal is for them to come back to school. And it's hard to come back to 7 classes. Come right back to school and get right in there. And so many of these children have to transition in, as do children with concussions. You can't go from being concussed to now you're in school the next day and you're going to 7 classes. So where do those children go when they're not in the classes? And so right now we use the guidance suite and the guidance counselors who are getting children into college and doing transcripts. And so in the Brookline Public Schools and the Hingham Public Schools and other public schools, but we went to those too, they have this transition class. Mm-hmm. And so if you ask the high school principal or the head of guidance today, they said to us, over the year, there are approximately 60 children that would go in and out of that transitions class. And that would assure their success when they transition back into school. So for some of these children, it means Mary stay at home, or Mary come to school and go to school for 7 classes. So this transitions class, we're seeing, again, with the increase in concussions and children with social emotional issues transitioning back to school is a huge issue. And right now, it wasn't pleasant for me when we had the huge meeting and somebody asked, where are they now? Well, they're in the room next door with their guidance counselor, and the room is a cubicle. If you've been to the guidance, who's been to the guidance suites, Mike? Mr. Charlie, you've been to the guidance suites. So the children are in those guidance suites with the guidance counselors. So the next is the Director of Social Emotional Learning. Chairman Walker brought me a clip at the first day of school that the Boston Public Schools have an assistant superintendent for business, curriculum, and social emotional issues. And so this is a growing need. These adjustment counselors, guidance counselors, and right now we've put together 2 very small grants to just coordinate our efforts from the Women's Club and a grant through the food service to just get somebody to be our point person for 1 year. But this is a need. I would tell you, the head of the superintendent's organization wrote to the superintendents on the first day of school, I'll send you the clip, and he said, everything you're about is this social emotional, children are not going to thrive in school and excel unless they're social emotionally well, and the world is now that the public schools own that social emotional aspect, and we have those children 7, 8, and for the ones who go in at 6 in the morning and leave at 7 o'clock, we have those children, and we have to coordinate the services. And again, it's a skill that I couldn't apply for because I don't have it. But this guidance counselor and adjustment counselors and the needs of the children are requiring somebody to be in charge of that social emotional learning.
Is this separate from special education needs?
Well, that's a really good question, because that too should have had that was a recommendation, Glenn, from the PCG. Will it cross over? It will cross over. In many of the children, it's written in their IEP. But for some of the children who see, when I talked about the adjustment counselor, the more children who are on IEPs, the less children who aren't on IEPs who might need those services just because there's a divorce in their family or a death in their family or some kind of issue comes up or they've been through a bullying incident. Again, some of them are through the special ed world, but some of them aren't through the special education world. But they're very intermingled. You're absolutely right.
How are the special education, the adjustment counselors currently evaluated and supervised?
Well, I'll let Mr. Walker, and then I'm going to tell you a story.
I wanted to go back to the Director of Social and Emotional Learning position. This is a position, this is an area that we've been talking about for a couple of years, but Member Bagley Jones, who chairs the Health and Wellness Subcommittee of our school committee, has been in the forefront of pushing us to gain more expertise in this area. So I'd like to have her talk about this because it's evolved, and I think we're at a point where this is a critical position. It is much broader than simply special ed. It is a position that will be valuable to the district.
Mary, will you move the mic over for?
Sure.
So, on the spot, but I can talk about this all the time. There, as Ms. Gormley said, there are some issues related to special ed issues, but it's really not about that. It's, if you think of a triangle where everybody in schools should get this level, like let's say bullying prevention, everybody across the board should get that. Then the next smaller one might be pulling in all the kids who are the bullies or are the targets, and you work with them, and then the top 5% of the triangle are the kids who actually need one-on-one help with that. We don't want to go with just looking at adjustment counselors who do the one-on-one counseling. We want everybody in the school system to get the services that they need that are based on this model. I don't know if that's clear or not, but it's across the board. It could be bullying. If you look at our results from our youth risk behavior survey, that shows that we have an awful lot of work to do in health education. I'm sure you've seen some of that in the Milton Times, but if you haven't, it would be good to look at. So we need universal interventions that go across the board. it's kind of like kids needing to learn how to read. You have that taught across the board, don't you? Well, why aren't we doing that for social emotional learning and help? That is what we need to have happen these days. Does that make sense? Do you have questions about that? So it is addressing some special ed needs, but it's really for all 4,000 students would be touched upon having social emotional learning supports put into place. Okay, question?
Well, just,
So
will
my
this be supervising
yes.
the?
So, to Dr. Ashes, who's going to supervise, when John Phelan was the assistant superintendent here, and James Jett both come from a background that they were in the guidance world. And so, to your point, the special ed director does not oversee the adjustment counselors. She doesn't have all of the certifications that when we hire an adjustment counselor, they have to have. And so a huge need within the district was to have somebody, I analogized it today in a meeting. I talked to your principals, your 6 principals, 1 to 7 times a day. What's your problem? I'll hook, I'll solve your problem with you. I'll brainstorm your problem. I'll get Glenn and Janet Sheehan. Sometimes the principals access one another to try to, again, 4,000 children, it's constant. And so we interviewed somebody today, and what I said to them was, we have an issue now, this is very timely, the two of you, we have an issue of these adjustment counselors, because who do they have to talk to about all of these cases? Where I analogize that the principals can talk to me, and I can brainstorm solutions with them and find them answers. But these adjustment counselors are really out there on their own. And so we spoke to somebody today about coming in just 3 hours a month. And other school districts, this is what they do, and you bring all the adjustment counselors together, and we'll go around and talk about our cases that were difficult, and how would you have solved this, or do you have this expertise, or this area is so broad that it's, you call them wraparound services, so you have a need, Michael, your family has the need, and your family needs to be told where they can get the kind of social services that they might not need. And this is what these adjustment counselors and guidance counselors, we call them wraparound services. Where your parents can get the help, where the preschooler can get the help, who'll go into your house from a social agency. And so right now, these individuals really are underneath the head of guidance, but again, she doesn't have that skill set. And our assistant superintendent works with these individuals, I do, but this, bringing somebody in who would be, have an expertise outside, really have experience, and just bring them together once a month for 3 hours to give them the information. And then what we said is, on a need-to-need basis, I have a family that, has a set of skills that I don't even know where to get them the social services, be able to call somebody to access that. So you're right. This whole umbrella in this world, and to Chairman Walker's point, this has been talked about, and the PCG study that I'll send you tomorrow refers to this, the need within the district. And it's going to be working smart, and if you're well and your family's well, then what's going to happen? You're going to thrive in school and learn well. So the transition program, the Restore Professional Development, again, we've prioritized the teachers, we've brought the text materials and supplies line down to the point that we possibly can, and the Title I. So based on your census, you're familiar with the Title I, identify schools that have a certain percentage of children whose family hit a threshold and a free and reduced criteria of their income. And so next, Glenn can do a dissertation on this, how it's changing. But based on the census, the funds that go to the Tucker have been reduced, the Title I funds. And we have inched away at our professional development funds because, again, if it's a need for a teacher or .2 speech therapist, and Glenn's our go-to person, we'd look and say, can we internally do that professional development? Can we not hire that consultant? And so we're at a breaking point that this is essential, this $100,000 in professional development. And it's a compilation, if we give you historical working away, and if these teachers aren't getting the training and the professional development, then they're not going to thrive and excel. So again, under improving student achievement, the next in improving student achievement, to Ms. Varela's point, this has been an issue that's come up over the years, and when we prioritize through the district, but now we're at a point in our elementary schools, and anyone who has an elementary child will know this, that this is really a need. If, again, you want to hear from our 4 elementary principals, and I think if you hear from the site councils and the PTO and the school leadership, this would be a half-time assistant at each of our elementary schools. Again, there are children issues, there are parent issues, parents who want to be spoken to all through the day, there are teacher issues, and we can do a comparison. I sent one to Glenn the other day. Across the state, there's a breaking point in most school districts. When you get to a certain number of students, there should be an assistant principal. And in 2 of our schools, we're beyond what those breaking numbers are. But we just don't look at the number of children, we look at the needs of the children in the school, and a half-time assistant principal is going to, again, enable that principal will do the skills. You know what assistant principals do, you remember from when you were in school. They do discipline, they do those lunch, and I will tell you, the first year, 2 of the principals started with us, and I called a meeting, they said, and who's going to be at lunch and recess for 3 hours? And so we really try to target our meetings after school, but there are sometimes we have to pull our principals out, and again, we need somebody in charge in one of those schools, but it's just not for the coverage, it's really for the supervision, the evaluation, working with parents and working with children.
Mary, you mentioned that 2 of the schools are beyond that threshold for needing a vice principal.
Lover and Collicott's
how
numbers.
close are the other 2, do you know?
Well, we can give you the enrollment in the schools, but it's sort of like your children. Needs, is it needs or is it numbers? Again, we don't say, well, you're needier because you have a higher number. Another school might have needs in an achievement gap that are require those kind of supports. And so we'll give you the numbers in the 4 elementary schools. But the enrollment in the Collicott and Glover School is very high. The additional instructional technology teacher, you have followed MCAS, and now you understand that MCAS is being there's going to be a new MCAS 2.0, but for the last 3 years, and this year, we're taking the PARC test. And across the state, we're moving to taking MCAS and PARC on computer. And because of the Milton Foundation and the Copeland Foundation, I'm not sitting here like, I can't even tell you the percentage of superintendents across the state saying to you, we don't have the broadband bandwidth to give those tests online. There are communities that are still in the paper and pencil. I will send you tomorrow the commissioner's email blast trying to find ways to help communities, and communities have to find this. We have somebody who you all know who works in another district who said the day before the PARC test, they rented the computers and brought them up for the children to take them on. I said, so they'd never been on the computer before they had to take the PARC MCAS on the computer. How could they go on that computer the day that they're taking that PARC MCAS test? So again, with this community and the capital, support of the capital funds in this community, the MFE and the Copelands, but again, we have one technology expert for we have a technology director that moves the whole district, but we have one elementary technology expert, and again, she moves the 4 schools, and we're requesting a second elementary instructional technology teacher. Again, that would be a Unit A teacher, and that would be her certification. Additional teacher support at grades 1 and 2 at the Tucker. Again, you referred to how many children in the school. At the Tucker, we have an acknowledged achievement gap that we're working at, and this reduction in the Title I funds, Glenn, of $100,000 this year,
Yep.
based on the census 3 years ago.
2 years ago.
2 years ago. Again, we need support at grades 1 and 2 at the Tucker School. And, you know, with your advancement, the town's commitment, as I say, they were the best 2 nights, not that these aren't wonderful nights, when the town meeting understood and supported the school budget. And so, again, to Chairman Walker's, we've made strides, and again, but there are acknowledged achievement gaps, and I wish I could tell you that the achievement gap for all children in special education, there are certain grades that that achievement gap began to close for children, African American Black children at certain grades, and children who are low income. But at the Tucker, we have an acknowledged achievement gap, and we need support at grades 1 and 2, coupled with the reduction of the Title I funds.
You're looking for 3 FTEs, and the cost is 187. These are teachers, I
Right.
presume, as opposed to. So you're planning to put additional teachers in?
Right. So it's a great question. This has worked out. When you have special education needs, what did we do to meet the needs of the special education children? We put what in the co-taught room? 2 teachers. We put 2 teachers. So we know that these 3 teachers, we have 4, 2 English and a French immersion. So we have 3 classes at the first grade at the Tucker, and 3 classes in the second grade. We'll take these 3 FTEs. They won't be there for art, music, library, gym, or FLES. They'll be there during reading and math. And so we'll take these 3 teachers and we'll target them to those 6 first and second grades. And paraprofessionals, we try to get paraprofessionals who are certified teachers, but what happens when you find those people and they become teachers? And so these will be certified teachers that we see it work in special education. And so that's the model that we want to use at the Tucker School. And right now, in the Tucker School, the reduction of $100,000, some of the money came out of programming, but some of it came out of staff. And we saw that that's where it worked. So when we have Title I money, we don't spend that on paraprofessionals. We get certified teachers. But it's a great question. And so, and then the last, this inclusion specialist. With all of this special education and having 2 teachers in the classroom, and now this philosophy of co-teaching, moving to the middle and high, and the children with the special needs staying in the district, we just can't say to the 2 of us, could you be co-teachers next year? It takes training. So what we did, we hired 1 inclusion specialist. You funded it for the district. And this person is so successful that they started to write it into some of these ed plans. And I said, you can't do that because then the person's time will be really too targeted. So what's happened at the middle and high, they know that their staff needs more work. The regular ed teachers, where these children with special needs are going, and the special ed teachers, how to work together. Because for a teacher's salary, I don't want you in the back of the room. I said, I know when it works, when I go in and the teacher's finishing the other teacher's sentences and both teachers are up on their feet teaching. And so these inclusion specialists, would these be positions that would need forever? No, but we're at the point with this inclusion in moving these children with special needs into the regular classroom, that your regular classroom teacher needs assistance. And so that was, when we send you the PCG report, you'll be able to follow which ones were recommended. When you asked the question about who oversees the adjustment counselors, and Mr. Walker and Kristen Bagley-Jones talked about the special ed director, again, this mass tiered system of support that you'll see in the PCG report, these 2 positions are really intermingled. The theory behind this position would be to work with regular ed teachers in this 3-tiered approach so that children might be able to have the support that they don't have to enter into an IEP. And so this, again, the PCG report said that we were really neglect, but when we talk about directors, in my world, that would have been 1.5 teachers of special education. So again, this PCG report said, districts with your proportion of special education, you really should have a director to oversee this mass tiered intervention. And what it is how can we help these children at preschool, kindergarten, first, second grade to achieve before they have to be tested for special education. And a high school teacher, a .5 STEM teacher, and a .5 math teacher for the alternative classroom. We have a classroom where between 20 and 30 children use that classroom during the day around behavioral issues. And again, some of the children have to stay in that classroom all day, but this whole world of certification has come to the point that we need, the teacher that's there now is English and math certified, and English and history certified, and we need a math and science teacher to be able to provide for those children. So if I have a child who needs that alternative program, can't stay in the 7 periods all day, not the transition program that I was talking about. Again, you have 1,000 high school students. Everybody doesn't go to the classes 7 periods a day, but a child might be able to go to the alternative program for 2 periods a day. It can't be their math and science, so we need a teacher there that's certified in math and science. And we'll send you, when we follow up with information, in the guidance, we have 4.5 guidance counselors, and based on the needs of the high school and anticipated enrollment, they're requesting another .5 FTE for a guidance counselor. So again, improving student achievement, the title would be $1.5 million. And we have noted when we send you this PCG, again, an independent organization that travels across the country. In Massachusetts, you'll read the districts that they go into, and they lived in the Milton Public Schools and did an evaluation and made recommendations. Expanding program options through the advancement initiative. Again, for some of our children who enter into the Milton Public Schools, they need more time. Nobody ever read that, the hour of 7 hours in the school day is the amount of time. We know that some of these programs beyond the school day have helped us close these achievement gaps. And we have used the data and the data specialists, so we know which programs you funded correlate to making growth in the park MCAS. So the extended day after-school instruction at the Tucker School, that would have been funded by the Title I, $10,000. ELA, the English Language Arts and Math Readiness, ELA Study Island at a cost of $10,000. This would be at the Tucker School, and this would be really a support every single day for these children who are not achieving, and a really regimented, rigorous program that would really mentor their work that they do beyond the school day. Restore a high school English teacher at a 1.0. Again, there are program options that we want to put in at the high school, and the class size numbers at the high school. This is a combination of, again, we have a speech requirement, how many, we might be only able to run one elective in drama, and this is a need that came up from the high school, a 1.0. And anybody who has a child at the middle school, you understand you could do this spot about the STEM elective. It has been very successful. Electives, you remember from your middle school and high school, art, music, library, and gym. Well, under the leadership of Dr. Karen Spalding, there's a STEM elective for children, and again, to turn that room into a lab would be a requirement of $10,000.
Superintendent Gormley? Sorry, what would the $10,000 for the study island buy?
It's a piece of computer software. Okay. But you have to, it's a licensed piece of software, and every child has a password. You work with the families. I don't know, do any of you remember Study Island? Mm-hmm. And so Study Islands, we worked with, and the PTOs helped us fund, and it's not being funded now, but we need it at the Tucker School. And then we're moving to expanding program, continuation of expanding program opportunities. I referred earlier that your advancement budget really funded the science curriculum in 3, 4, and 5. I met with the elementary science coordinator. She said, I may have been appointed at the perfect time because we had the materials, and the teachers all knew that we had the materials, and the science coordinator science at the elementary school, we need to purchase K-1 science materials to stay. So 3, 4, and 5 is what your advancement budget in the last 3 years bought. But these K-1 are using materials that are old and outdated. And complete the purchasing of the Discovering Justice curriculum. We were in this program in the Milton Public Schools, and we didn't stay up with the updated version. This program is out of the Moakley Court. It's in the area of social studies, and again, I get surveys every single day, and I'm proud to tell you I surveyed the principals today. Grants are being written across this nation for school districts where hate crimes are happening, and language and incidents, and, I could respond from each of the principals' feedback that you're not seeing that in the Milton Public Schools. But this Discovering Justice is really an equity program, and it teaches all children at that early age about children of all races and all needs. I would tell you, do you all remember Ruby Bridges? So Ruby Bridges was the first child to go into a school in the South, and there's a wonderful book about Ruby Bridges, and the children read it, and one of the teachers knew the teacher who worked with the child in the South, and she lived in West Roxbury, and brought in the teacher who was able to talk to those first graders at the Collycott, what it was like for the first child of color to try to cross those lines and go into that school. And so, again, when you talk about that, when children are in the elementary school, and we, again, have only parts of the program, this $30,000 would give us a full implementation at the elementary school. And again, we go to the PTOs and we go to the MFE, but this would really support that curriculum. And we're language, culturally focused library books. I believe this was a purchase at the middle school?
Yes.
A $5,000 purchase at the middle school. So that is a total of expanding program options. And then finally, reducing costs to parents and guardians. I alluded to this earlier. Over the years, I don't believe anybody that goes to a public school should have to pay to participate in athletics and sports or go to a club and activity. And we live in a community, and I'm in charge, so I'm responsible, that we have fees that are as high as anyone else's and prohibitive. And you tell me that you've met a high schooler who wants to raise a hand and say, my family can't afford the fee. And the school committee laughs, but I'm not an athlete, so here's another little story. I find the $300, how much is it, Glenn?
For sports, $300.
$300. What I didn't realize is, other than track, when you get there, you have to have your own equipment. Everybody brings their own racket or glove. And so this is a very, very expensive endeavor, and you could say, how do we get here? Over the years, well, we'll keep a teacher by having a small fee to belong to the drama club. And I will tell you and send you the research within the week, the correlation to achievement when that football coach is looking every single Friday at your progress report. And the correlation to, I'm going to school for those 7 classes because I'm in Cinderella at the end of the day. And so the correlation to involvement in after-school activities, I'm probably preaching to the converted here, is huge. And so we can show you all of the fees from across the state. And we're not the only people. Glenn and I fill out a survey 3 times a year. For probably superintendents like myself, we'll send you the chart, and you can see, but we're deep into these fees. And to me, this will support any kind of vote that you go to the voters for, because we're not asking you to reduce fees, we're asking you to cut them in half. And so right now, we rely on fees. You have an athletic program that we rely on charging the children the fees, the school budget, and what you pay at the gate receipts. That's another night. If you want another night, a tutorial, we'll do a night on the athletic budget. That would be a very interesting, again, and it's huge.
Question here.
Are these fees at all need income adjusted?
It's a great question. If your family identifies that you are qualified for free and reduced lunch, so our Jackie Morgan, Betty's sister, is one of the finest food service directors in the state. We put out multiple times how to, and if parents are watching, guardians of families, how to go into the free and reduced, how to enter into the free and reduced. And now, when you're younger than I, but when I was young, then when you went for your lunch, you had to identify. Now, everyone has a badge. So you don't know that I'm getting free and reduced. That qualifies you. Free is one category, and then reduced is another category. So that qualifies you. But you know, at the high school level, we have elementary children in families who get free and reduced lunch, but the high school children won't avail themselves of it. You got to understand that. Nobody doesn't understand that. So our athletic director, we do a tremendous amount of work. Jackie Morgan goes out again and again, through the churches, through the temples. How can we reach these families? Through print, through my email blast. You don't have to sign up the first day. Teachers come forward. I think, could I send that form to the family with a little note? So we do, but I want to tell you, the correlation to the use of it at high school is their children are. And then the athletic director will tell you, well, we say that you can work the money off. So how many have high school children? I'm going to go find the athletic director and say, I promise you that I'll do some, it's really hard. It's really, really hard. And I know that we're missing the population. I know that we're missing a population that it would make a huge difference. And I'm surprised Chairman Walker isn't taking the mic. Because what we do with this MCAS data is that we actually take our athletic teams, and I'll send you this tomorrow, we know on every athletic team their percentage of children of color. And so we're tracing these children, we're tracing these students on free and reduced, and you can see the way we're digging into the data. And again, the fees are prohibitive. The fees are prohibitive. And again, that part about if you go, other than track, they bring their own equipment. And now we work with a group of Citizens of Diverse Milton, and their second meeting of the year, they wrote to me today, I forwarded to Chairman Walker, they want us to bring together all of the leaders of youth sports in the town. Because if you go to the Milton High School site on Saturdays and Sundays, I charge you to do that and go into that field house. The feeder teams are not diverse in this town. So I'm saying it on TV. The feeder teams. And so we have the issue of the fees, and then we have the feeder teams. So the Citizens of West Milton working with me, this is what they want to take on. They want to educate the community on how to go out and reach and make all these elementary feeder teams more, everybody understands, I'm not an ice hockey fan anymore. So when, you have to learn you don't pick up skates. I say you don't pick up a golf club when you're in the 9th grade. It seems to be this feeder. You have to have some experience. But now, everybody understands who's an athlete. In soccer, in this travel, this whole world of athletics, not other than track, and I rely on track, and you'll see, everybody else, you just don't go out on the football field if you haven't done these youth football, or you haven't been in soccer in the youth program. And so I'm not going to embarrass you how many of your children have been in these youth programs, but there's a whole population of children. So the fees are huge, and these youth programs are huge. But this Citizens of West Milton want to take on educating these individuals and their volunteer parents who head these youth leagues about, how to reach out and make these feeder programs more diverse.
That's great. I'm glad that you're working
Did I go
with...
somewhere off your question?
I'm glad you're working with Citizens for Diverse Milton. That's great. Could you just remind us, what are the transportation and
Good
the
question.
athletic fees, and what is the per family max again?
We should put all of that attached to this slide.
Bus fees are $375 with a family cap of $750. Family cap of 2, I think it's $375, maybe it's $350 and $700. I'd have to go check. The athletic fees are $300. It's higher for crew, and it's higher for hockey. And family cap is $700 for, but it's higher again for crew or hockey.
Okay.
No, you just said something
No, it's
different.
1,500 cap.
Yes.
For sports.
15, right, it's 1,500 for sports, right, for per year.
But that's a good question that we should attach to this. All of the fees, what the family caps are.
And just to let you know, crew is $700 a season. It's a fall
Sheila's saying
season,
the crew is $700 a season.
a season.
So you might say, well, why is the superintendent letting that happen? So a group of parents came to me wanting crew at Milton High School. And so remember, we have to compete. And so the crew is very, just like this hockey equipment, is very expensive, these shells. So this group in town, what's it called, the Neponset?
Valley rowing.
Have really taken on the crew, and they have gone to universities and gotten all these used shells. And they have gone and they have gotten all of the equipment. The public schools could never, you should be sitting there saying, why, raise your hand, why crew? But they have done all of that. And we meet with them all, did you say, it's not 700, I got them down to 650, and we're keep wanting to work away at it to bring it down to what ice hockey is, but to get crew going, and again, the shells are donated, but they have to be maintained, and what happens is, we are competitive. They tell me that let's say there are 60 students in crew, 40 of those students wouldn't be in another athletic team. So for me, I go to sleep at night and say, all right, 40 children who wouldn't go out for another athletic activity are involved in an activity, and, Chairman Walker, one of the little girls who got signed the other day for a free ride at Crew. So, but you could say, here she's talking about the fees, and that's prohibitive. And I would tell you, on behalf of Crew and the leadership of Crew in this community, they will accommodate families that can't do that. And so, but again, it's prohibitive.
Thank you.
It's really high.
I just had a quick question on, actually, two questions. The bus fees, I know it's hard to match up to other towns, but do you know, like, where
We're high.
we're high? And for both of those, I mean, because I know it wasn't always a charge for buses. When did that start being a charge? And for sports, the same question, because I think,
Bus fees have been around for a long time. But we used to
that
be.
just means I've been out of school a long time.
It used to be, we were a little more generous than the law required with bus fees. The law requires anyone who is outside of 2 miles to receive free busing in grades K through 6. We used to transport anyone outside of 1.5 miles. Several years ago, we moved back to 2 miles. And then there's always been some sort of fee, sort of fill the remaining seats on the buses, but that has crept up considerably over time. I think it's been a while since my kids were on the bus, but I think it was about $100 20 years ago, but it's, $300 now. It's significant.
Sports too was very.
Sports, again, we're on the high end of comparable. We absolutely are. I mean,
Yeah, no, because my only comment there is, I mean, and I appreciate the comments about the in-need and things like that, but for everybody, I think, the fees, everybody feels the fees.
And you know what, I'm really glad you said that. It is everybody.
'Cause
And you know what did I start with?
Yeah.
No one should go to a public school and have to pay to participate in a sport in a club after school.
Because I remember, 25 years ago, I played a lot of sports just to try the sport. I mean, that's tough today, to try a sport just because you want to try it, because it gets expensive.
And just to speak too, that's also, and Glenn, I'm pretty sure.
If you want to make a comment,
Yeah,
just come up to the microphone.
The other thing that's stressful, no, I know, really, I need my microphone. The other thing that's stressful with regards to fees is that, sometimes you don't know if you're going to even make the team, but you kind of have to register, do the concussion, pay the $300. Like I even said, if she doesn't make tennis, I'm getting the $300 back, yes? Because you're required to do all this, and sometimes on certain teams that, there's cuts, you don't know that. So that's a huge thing to cough that up when you don't even know. And this includes things like cheerleading. Cheerleading, if you want to cheerlead, $300. It's a sport. I mean, it's everywhere to do this, so,
I've paid for that one, yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's a big gulp, you know?
So where do you draw the line? What happens if someone wants to do polo? Are you gonna buy the horses and, you know, just, you know?
That's a really good question.
How do you figure that out?
Listen, you should be careful if this is televised, they might be calling you. There's a group of parents who are very interested in gymnastics. We had gymnastics when I went to Milton High. You know, but we're not going to do gymnastics because it is a public announcement because of, but now the other day, the athletic director said, but maybe if there are some children, and I think he told me Dedham in another community, and we can tuition in those children if they want gymnastics. But remember, we're competitive, so we have an athletic director who is experienced, and we have the sports. We don't see, you know, they have to come to me for like 5 years before we put a new sport. So I'll tell you, there's no new sports coming. What's on the agenda is the gymnastics, and I'm gonna call you. And so it's a long time, and they build a lot of constituency before there's a new sport in the Milton Public Schools. And then we look at sports if a sport is under-enrolled. But don't think that they don't come to me all the time. They don't understand why there's not a girls' volleyball and a boys' volleyball and an integrated volleyball. And so, but again, if a sport wasn't enrolled, and to Sheila Varela's point, your point, when I went to school, you were on a sport, and sometimes you sat on the bench, but you felt like you were part of the team, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, now for $300, I get a lot of calls, so my child's not getting time.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
So that's hard, and some people figure it out, but, you know, for like non-athletes like we were, being part of the team was something. But for that kind of fee, some people choosing not to do that. But we do get a lot of pressure about more teams, more athletic teams, putting new teams in. But it takes like 5 years, and we go to the school committee before a new team goes in.
And the other compromise we've had to make there, with the last two sports being crew and swimming, is to say we can't accommodate any more stresses on the operating budget, so the arrangement is you'll have to charge a fee that self-funds the sport, and that's why crew fee is higher, and that's why the swimming fee is higher, because they're self-sustaining. So,
Makes sense.
right.
Fair, though? Fair?
Yeah.
No, not really
Well-
fair. I know. It's really hard if you believe in a public education is for every single child in the town.
But eventually, the money's gonna come out of all of the taxpayers' pocket anyway. We're doing the 2.5 override, so those parents are gonna be paying for having the reduced fees of having their kids in sports.
Right. And I think that there would, you know, hearing parents, there would be a tremendous amount of support for, and again, we're not looking to eliminate the fees. And you know, in the geographical area that we live, there aren't fees in our neighboring communities. There are a lot of communities, when we sent you the data, that don't have athletic fees.
Wow.
I have some questions too, but do other folks have questions before we
I have,
move on? Yep, go ahead.
Just a comment that I want to express regarding fees in public schools. I think it's detrimental, basically because it sets a public-private school attitude in the program, which is, you know, so against the public school attitude and how it was formed. But getting away from that, I just had a question about the programs and the cost of them. And my question was, the teachers are union. And so what's the average workday? What are the times for the average workday? Is it
7 hours.
7 hours?
And
So-
and I would say that anybody here, that at 5:30, the high school parking lot begins to fill up, and at 6 at night. So.
5:30 in the morning.
5:30 in the morning. So no, you know, you understand public education, and you understand teachers. It's 7 hours required by the contract, but nobody corrects and plans during that 7 hours.
Yes, yes. But my question wasn't pertinent to that. It's like when you have extended day after school instruction?
Good question.
Who does that?
We would hire a teacher in the contract that you're going to get. You'll see in the back, and that teacher would be there from 4 to 6 for extended day at the Tucker School, and they would be paid an hourly amount of money.
Okay.
Or sometimes if I couldn't, we couldn't find a Milton Public School teacher, we'd hire somebody certified. We've had parents and residents who come forward. So that's a great question. It wouldn't be a paraprofessional, wasn't certified. That would be an hourly salary.
Okay, thank you.
Good question.
Questions? Yes, Jonathan?
Where do we stand in the contractual cycle, the teacher's contract? Where are we now?
Just settled the contract last year, so it's a 3-year contract.
So we don't
Year one.
always settle the contracts prior to the beginning of the contractual period.
this time
So
we
that's
did.
Okay, yeah, I couldn't remember. All right, so,
So we're in the first of a 3-year contract.
And what is the percentage salary increase they're getting each
2%.
year? 2. That's in addition to inflation or just?
That's the
straight
inflation,
to-
too.
to-
Cost of living.
Others? I have a few things. There's a couple of things in here on the last couple of pages that I would identify as one-time items. I'm surprised that they're in a budget that would be an ongoing operational budget. So maybe I need to view them differently or hear a little bit more from you. But there's a couple of things like the science curriculum for K1 FOSS, the Discovering Justice curriculum, the Study Island you mentioned was a licensed software, so I assume that's an annual license. But the upgrade to the STEM classroom lab at 10,000, and then there were the Spanish texts. So I'm wondering how these one-time things, if they are one-time things, fall out of your regular budget, and if you're really looking for an increased an increase to your ongoing budget for materials.
Are you thinking that maybe we could take that out of free cash?
I'm thinking maybe it's more appropriate as a free cash request.
So again, I think that's exactly right. And if, as in previous years, we had been having a parallel discussion about what things should appropriately be override requests and what things should be one-time requests, then I agree with you. Many of those things that you listed would be on our one-time list. But again, we haven't had an invitation to start that discussion. So.
Okay.
But we could certainly separate out, we have $1.3 million in free cash, we know that, so we could certainly separate out those things that would be candidates for one-time item requests.
Okay. And then with regard to several of these items where they say restore or replace, I think you do yourself a little bit of a disservice by lumping them into a category called expanding program opportunities, for instance. Because in many cases, because of the nature of municipal finance, we've chipped away at the school budget over the years to save teacher positions. So some of this contingent budget request is really to restore prior cuts that you've had to make, not really to add new things. So that just might be a slightly different spin that you want to put on it, or something that we at least should talk about, because some of these things were things that we used to have that we lost.
Right, and we could talk about the headlines, but I think the point we're trying to make there in calling it expanding program opportunities is to say that these things should have a direct, we're laser focused on what happens in the classroom and how can we make sure that we're providing as much direct instruction and quality instruction in the classroom. So in that regard, our feeling is that, so these things contracted, now we're expanding those opportunities again. But I think calling them, we did that last year, we called them restoration of prior cuts. I think this time we tried to talk about, in the spirit of equity and excellence, how do these things impact direct instruction or the quality of instruction?
As a summary number, I think it would just be a good factoid to have, because if you're going to go to town meeting and ask for an override budget of $1 point whatever million, it would be good to say, this isn't all new stuff. Some of this is stuff we've had to cut because you haven't passed an override in X number of years. Anybody else? I have another. Want to refer back. Glenn, could you pop back to slide, I think it's 5.
I'll try.
I can do it faster.
I think you
actually.
can do it faster. We're at the edge of my buttons here.
So on slide 5, I was giving some thought to
You
your.
asked me to jump ahead to 29, it's the same slide.
Oh, okay, sorry. Well, I'll help you move ahead when it's time to go ahead. But when I'm looking at the difference between the level service and what your contingent request would be, what is the number there?
The contingent request is not on that page.
Right, but what is the difference between level service and contingent?
Oh, well, we should jump ahead.
$1.9 million.
1.9. Lee,
30.
Run ahead past where we just were, because there are 3 or 4 slides left. One of them is that one,
Your very question.
which is your question.
Well, what I was going to lead up to was what I read in the Milton Times, and I don't think any of you wrote it, so I'm not holding you accountable, but the opening 2 sentences said something like, the school committee passed a non-contingent budget, which was an increase of 6.5%, which is on slide 5, which won't require an override of Proposition 2.5. And
I'm glad someone thought of that.
I think that unfortunately sets up a terrible basis for trying to move ahead with a discussion on contingent versus non-contingent, because people forget that Prop 2.5 means you can't raise taxes more than 2.5%. You add to that new growth. What was our new growth? It was like $800,000 or something, right? Schools are about 50% of the budget, so you're getting about $400,000 from that, maybe, hopefully, right? It's 65% of the budget. And what is the new state and federal aid to the schools over last year, off the top of your head?
Well, I think due to the full-day kindergarten, we're looking at about 900,000 in additional Chapter 78.
I think we might that's not included in your contingent request, though. So excluding that, like, is it a reduction or is it an increase aside from?
Oh, you mean just in general state
Yeah.
aid? The consensus revenue estimates aren't out yet, as far as I know. They had hearings in the last couple of weeks. The estimates ranged from 2.7 to 4.1% in revenue growth for the state for next year. So whatever the consensus revenue estimate is from the state, which should be out in a couple of days, will be in that range.
Okay.
I don't know what that'll mean for state aid, but it's the revenue half of the state pie. But they've had their initial hearings, and they brought in, Mass Taxpayers Foundation and some others, experts to try to estimate revenue over the next year. And that's where we are at the moment. Beyond that, I don't know.
Well, whatever that number comes out to, the difference between what your request is from last year to what your non-contingent request is from this year, and what your increase from the Prop 2.5 is, and what your proportion of the increase in new revenue, there is a delta. And I would love to know what that delta is. And I don't think you can calculate it just yet because you need that
Yeah, I haven't seen
state aid. But
we have to sit down with.
that Milton Times article mischaracterized, I think, the nature of your non-contingent budget. Because it does not mean that there doesn't have to be an override, because we're probably going to have to make cuts to your non-contingent budget to fit in the budget.
There's a reason we didn't call it the non-contingent budget in PowerPoint. We called it a level service budget, because you're exactly right. Absent revenue estimates for the town, absent the numbers for all the different budgets for all the town, we don't know what that delta is yet. Haven't seen the spreadsheet, or at least I haven't. And you're right, very likely is a delta to fund the level service budget, which is particularly why it's not called a non-contingent budget here, but a level service budget, because we frankly, absent revenue estimates, we don't know what a non-contingent budget is. And therefore, we don't know what a contingent budget is.
So has anyone asked you or asked the warrant committee for assistance in doing the revenue estimates that we usually do in September and October, I'm sorry, in mid-October, once we have certified free cash?
Not quite yet. I've seen some emails on that, but I haven't been involved in the conversation yet. But
Since that would
the next time we get together, you know, and when discussing the possibility of a contingent budget, part of that conversation is going to be the non-contingent scenario probably means cuts to the schools.
We're acutely aware of that, and
The Milton Times wasn't acutely aware of it, or at least that article wasn't.
They don't ask us to edit, I'm
I got a lot of
afraid.
responsibilities, but one of them is not writing for the Milton Times, so.
Right. I didn't happen to have time to write a letter to the editor that week, but here's my editorial comment.
We're assuming that as part of that process, and you'll be asking us to, you'll be telling us what our share of the shortfall is, and therefore what cuts we need to plan.
Right. Sheila would love to join us at the table.
So just to follow up on Chairman Walker, so with all the other intel that's needed, when do you estimate when we'll know what that shortfall is to the level service or / non-contingent, budget? Because that's key, and, I'm just going to say, to follow up on what was said earlier by Superintendent Gormley, it's key to have that information when we continue to fine-tune that and before we go out to the schools, right? Because we want to let them know, at level service or non-contingent without an override, this is what we're looking at. And then also present, the contingent and ask them for feedback about, what they feel is high priority and all that kind of stuff.
We're unfortunately setting sail into a perfect storm because we're at the beginning of a budget process where we probably, almost all of us agree that a contingent budget is going to be necessary, since there was one that was necessary last year and the year before maybe. And we have a new town administrator, and that new town administrator has new budgeting responsibilities, but the poor guy needs time to get up to speed. I think Glenn is probably in the best position to take 65% of our new growth and add it to whatever additional state and federal aid you're going to get and say, okay, we're $500,000 short, or whatever the number is.
Okay.
I think I've been given homework.
But I mean, do you even guesstimate we might have it by February?
Yeah.
Definitely, like early February?
I didn't say definitely.
Yeah, I mean,
Said
well,
do I
potentially,
Yeah.
that would be great.
We have to have conversations in early January, starting in early January, about contingent versus non-contingent. And so as soon as we can get numbers, but part of that is what aid the state and the feds are giving you. That'll be
Great. Thank you.
necessary to know.
So I think it would be helpful if we renew our request for a joint meeting with the selectmen.
Yep.
Warrant committee, selectmen, school committee, so we could have exactly this discussion.
Well, I copied you guys on what our January, February schedule is, so we'll have to fit a meeting in somewhere. Okay, sorry to have interrupted your flow.
That's all right, we were at the end of it anyway. I mean, the final slide was simply to say that when it comes time to talk about cuts, just in round numbers, $500,000 is approximately 8 FTE positions. And at this point, where we're not working with any hard numbers, this is just a ballpark to let you know the kinds of decisions we'll be making come that point. Let me just say that the rest of this book has all sorts of things in it for you. And if I could just take 2 minutes and walk you through it. The budget summary page is the one that are folded over. This is, if you can believe it, this is 6 or 7 pages, is the short version of our budget. The front page are the 7 major categories. The back pages are how they break out according to DESI categories. And if you live in my world, each of those breaks out into about 15 more sub-categories, but you don't need to see that. You want to see that, let's put it like that. But this will give you a breakout really down to some detail with some history of where the different pieces of the budget are going. Because when you're looking at $44 million, I mean, it's just too big a number to wrap your head around at once. You've got to break it out into little pieces and say, you know, you know, having sat here for a number of years in the basement myself, I remember arguing about the number of paper clips that the town clerk was gonna buy, because you could understand that number, as opposed to, you know, $17 million in special education costs. So I'm trying to break it down to manageable pieces so you can see what's going on. The rest of the book, at the back of that section, there are a short list of those continued budget priorities all in one page, so you don't have to scan through the PowerPoint to see them. And then there's a section on each of the 7 major categories: policy and administration, instructional leadership, and so forth. They have a section there on all of the personnel in each of those categories, including when you get to the instruction line. There is, you know, a list of every teaching position and the salary, so you can see how it rolls up to the numbers we're using and where they came from. And in some of the categories, which contains athletics, you'll find a chart back there showing how the athletic budget breaks out over the different pieces. What comes from the general fund, what comes from fundraising, what comes from fees, what comes from gate receipts. Athletics is $850,000 budget, but only a third of that comes out of the general fund. There's a lot going on in other places. So in that section, when you look in the instructional services, you can see where that plays out. Special education, similarly, it breaks down into the various DESI categories. You can see our special education teachers lined out in there. You can see the special education aides lined out in there, where they work, what they do, what they're paid. It has a piece on transportation. You can see that, you know, this year we're spending, our budget is $920,000 on special ed transportation. So there is, that's in there. At the back of the special education, on one short multicolored page, or 2 short multicolored pages, there's a list of our out-of-district placements. All the names have been removed and everything like that. But you can see the sort of things we're doing with out-of-district placements, who's in, what we have for private placements, collaboratives. You can see where that money goes out, how much of the circuit breaker money comes back in to replenish it, and what our net costs are for out-of-district, because at $3 million net costs, it's worth 2 pages to see where the money's going. So, I mean, that's in there too, so you can look at it. When you get back into the facility section, there's some data on where we came up with the utility estimates. So that's in there as well, so you see what we were working on. Just on a word about stormwater, our latest estimate from DPW is that we're going to be hit with an $18,000 stormwater fee for this year, which was unbudgeted because we didn't know about it last spring, and again, a little more for next year. So, I mean, that's a new piece to our budget that we've never had before. But that's the order of magnitude we're looking at for the schools, about $18,000 in stormwater fees. So that's...
Did you answer Chuck's question before you leave utilities?
I'll find it. Sure,
It's in the, if you go in the facility section. Well, you can see the computations which I used to try to heat of buildings at a modest increase from last year. That's the natural gas. The electricity, I'm working off of actuals, extrapolating this year's and figuring in a cost adjustment for next year, so you can look through that. I've got actual budgeted and expected costs for phones, water, and sewer, and we do charge off a certain amount of these to community schools, rentals, and summer schools, so that's there on the bottom, so what you're seeing is a net piece. With that, the last few tabs here aren't actually part of our budget, but they are collateral organizations. Food service is a self-supporting organization, so there's a little budget sheet on that to see how that supports itself. All the people who work in the cafeterias, the cooks and servers and so forth, are funded through this. They're not funded through the general budget. The playground aides are part of the general budget because they don't serve food. But if they serve food, they're in the food services budget, they're not in the general fund budget. So there's a one-page in there on what the school lunch program looks like. The section on revolving funds, these are all of our other funding sources. When, if you pay a sports fee, it goes into a revolving fund. And so we fund out of there. And so you can see here, we have about 40 revolving funds for different things. Some of these will go away because you'll notice a couple of them are labeled full-day kindergarten tuition funds. Well, we haven't got that anymore. So those funds will become dormant funds, and they'll come off the books because they have no balance in them, and they'll just cease to exist. But they're still in here. But you can see where we collect different things. Money for field trips, things like that, goes through there. Grants, this is our, there's a single page in here on our grants for last year. We have, we're in the process of looking at some grants this year. Some of these were one-time grants and will not come back. The early literacy preschool, for instance, teen dating violence prevention were one-time grants, but we have a few one-time grants in the works for this year as well. The federal grants at the top, one was alluded to already, the Title I fiscal 16 grant, you can see was $263,000. This year it's $155,000. So a substantial cut to that grant this year due to demographics. Our population of economically disadvantaged children went from just over 5% to just under 5%, and you get a bonus if you're at 5%, and bang, we lost it. So it was a significant hit to our Title I funds, just because we fell over a little cliff in their funding formula. If you're really into numbers, I draw your attention to the enrollment chart numbers.
Yeah, I was looking at that already.
It's
interesting.
this is a preliminary. We're still meeting with NASDAQ to refine these numbers, but I can only characterize them as frightening. We are a very attractive community. My favorite statistic in this is if you look at the number of children who were born 5 years ago, and how many of them attend kindergarten this year, 130% of them attended kindergarten this year, which as a mathematician is a really striking statistic. But it means people are moving to this town, and they're moving here for the schools, and it's clear. And these projections show that we're going to have a serious problem in our elementary schools in the next few years in terms of capacity.
That's what I was going to ask, how old the schools are, and do you anticipate needing to
Well, these are
do
new.
anything?
Our schools are no more than 10 years old, right?
I wasn't here 10 years ago.
But they were built for 14 classes of each elementary. Three at the Cunningham, 4 at the Collycutt, 3 at the Tucker, 4 at the Glover. So we're built to hold 14 classes of each grade. We hold 15 right now by using a spare room here and there and rotating it around from year to year. This year we have 16 kindergartens. This data indicates next year we're going to need 17. I don't know where that 17th room is. And some of the data a couple of years out, if you can believe it, says it's going to be worse than that. So it's going to be interesting to figure out what exactly we're doing in the elementary school population. Part of that is our preschool is in the elementary schools too. We may be we're starting to look at things with the enrollment projection folks and say, do we need a designated preschool space somewhere outside of the schools? I mean, but at the moment, we're trying to refine these numbers. I've gotten numbers from the town hall as to number of building permits, all the various different things on the horizon, things that have been permitted, things that have not yet been permitted, things that are still being dreamed about. But if you figure those, there's more growth coming. And so it's an interesting and somewhat troubling picture that's starting to take place.
And it's very interesting, when we address the kindergarten parents in January, I feel the need to remind them, they think they come in and they see these buildings. So I think the residents of Milton are the most fortunate in the state. In every other community, you do one school at a time. This community, under the leadership of the community and several talented people, $140 million school building project. Glenn does an adaptation. $8 million from the Copeland Foundation, and all the schools are new or renovated to new. So the Collycutt's brand new, another school's 60% new, but I dare you to go into a Milton Public School, you cannot tell what's renovated or new. So to think that project is done. It's not being pulled over 20 years, one school at a time, and that these residents got 90 cents, I'm a resident, 90 cents on the dollar. It's extraordinary. But I think the kindergarten parents come, and I want to say to them, but, they want their children in space that's safe, that's well vented, that's the ventilation, the lighting, the facilities. And when people see these schools, a lot of these schools was at the end of the project, you should all know that the Cunningham Foundation, the Copeland Foundation, looked at the list and said, well, I'll take your gym and make a field house. And you can rent it and help with your maintenance. I'll give you 200 more seats in your auditorium so you'll be able to do this. We'll build you with the Cunningham Foundation full-day kindergarten classrooms. We'll put terrazzo entrances in each school. So when you go into these schools, we engineered Glenn and the Mr. Winchesters and the Tony Cacellos of the world down to bare bones, and then those enhancements really made this property. And now Roy Walker, Glenn Pavlicek, it's a huge charge. And Charlie Winchester sat there and said, don't ever let the schools get in the condition they did again. And this consolidated facilities is ensuring that we're watching the town's investment. But this is an extraordinary story. 6 schools. 6 schools. In other towns, it's, school A got done, and school B has to wait till they get on the list 10 years from now. It's an extraordinary story.
I just have a quick question. The department that's responsible for maintaining or reducing the expenses, consolidated facilities, is that, okay. When they come in and they repair the things for you, does that decrease the cost of your expenses in your financials?
They pay for the labor, I pay for the materials if they come into the school.
Okay, so it does then?
It's included in here.
Yeah.
So
But you're not paying what you would have to pay on the market? Like if you...
Well, we're still buying it on the same market, it's just they're buying it in bulk for the town. And
Right.
they charge us for what is used to repair our facilities.
But you're right, when they have a painter on staff,
Yeah.
we don't have to go out.
The labor does charge,
Right.
it saves money overall.
Okay, so when we're looking at your expenses, they're less than what you would have to pay if you were just, private?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
certainly our contracted labor would be is much less than it would
Okay.
otherwise be.
All
I mean, the fact that we have, the Bill Ritchie has a plumber and a painter
Yeah.
and so forth means we don't have to contract in those, and that's huge. He could use a finished I'll speak for Bill, he could use a finished carpenter, he could use a couple other positions that would help us as well,
Yeah.
that help the whole town. We had 2 maintenance people that moved over with their budget to the consolidated facilities 2 years ago, our HVAC person and 1 maintainer, and their salary moved over with them, but they work the whole town now.
Oh, glad
Yeah.
if it was up to me, you would have had them last year.
Yeah, that's right.
But and to that point, it's something like the food service, when you look at that bottom line, my analogy is all the kitchens were built in the same year, so all the stoves are going to go at the same time. So that bottom line, it's Glenn and Jackie Morgan follow the federal guidelines to a T, but that's the funds that will replace and maintain those kitchens.
So do you
Richard
have
has a
like a
question.
budget as far as a long-term capital improvement budget set up for those items?
Oh, for the food service?
Or for anything that you're planning, anticipating?
We do. We have a 5-year capital plan. But there are some major capital expenditures that we're going to be facing, both as a school district and as a town, and that we've talked about in general terms but aren't yet on the capital plan, at least in the next 3 or 4 years. Those are fire stations for the schools, as Mary said. So the stoves are going to go, but the heating systems are going to go. Roofs, they're going to be, because we did this project all at once and renovated and created new buildings, that means that roughly all of those things those needs are going to come at a particular time, probably in the next 4 or 5 years.
So then what do we do then?
I'm not done yet. And the most difficult analysis that we have as a school committee over the next couple of months is to look at this enrollment information. The first question was, is the enrollment increase a bubble or a trend? Seems to be a trend. We're not, on the basis of one analysis, going to come to you and say that this looks like a trend and therefore we're going to have capacity issues and therefore we're going to need a new facility. But we're going to try to ensure that we get another independent analysis. But it looks like we're going to be facing that question very soon. And therefore, that could also require an override. Roughly $30 million facility reimbursement rate is probably about 31%, so we can do the math there. So it's at least $22 million expenditure. So how we as a town are going to pay for those major capital items, we've been doing well with the 5-year capital plans that we've had. None of those had $29 million facilities on them yet, and we're facing that very soon. So we have some difficult decisions as a town to make, juxtaposed with a discussion about an operational override. We're going to be asking some very tough questions of town meeting and of the taxpayers of this town, I think probably in the next 12 to 18 months.
I'd like to recognize Richard. He's been waiting to.
Oh,
ask a
yeah,
question.
and you don't have to go into too much detail about it, and I know we've talked about it a long time ago, but real quickly, like, the thought process that goes into, like, for example, when you put together the reduced bus fees by $100, so 46 grand, do you have, like, a thought of what you're trying to get to? What would be, like, in your minds, an acceptable amount for something like that line item? Like, the same could, well, no, that's a good, well, okay,
Right. No fees and no bus fees.
is what you're trying to
You know,
get to.
That's right. So when you went to school,
Right,
if you went to a public school,
yeah.
and no, I'm not saying we're not going back, but, and there are districts, you know, there are no fees. And so you look at your district and you decide what's appropriate. And tonight we shared with you, it's having its impact. You know, we spend an inordinate amount of time with buses. You know, Glenn and I and a person that gets a small stipend, we do a lot of work with this.
So I guess that's what, the
Does
reason
anybody
why.
want to raise a hand? You
I
know,
guess the reason
I've
why-
talked to a lot of you. We do a lot of work with these buses, and we're hitting the buffer here.
So I guess the reason why I asked that question is if you're saying 100, you know, reducing it by 100, because it's what, 350 now, so that'd be 250, and if your goal is to get to 0, and now seems like the time that you're putting together the budget for an override, wouldn't now be the time to ask for that, or are you waiting, or do you have like a 5-year plan to get to 0?
Mary's dream is to get to 0.
Okay.
You will see it someday in Milton. You will see it. The population will drive the elimination
Mary's
of
going to run for select.
athletic fees and transportation. You will, in your lifetime. Yeah, it's really prohibitive.
Okay.
We're at a breaking point here.
Folks,
And it's
anybody-
having an impact. You know, we take, these bus fees are impacting Milton Public School families. They're impacting your neighbors if they're not impacting you. And I want to tell you, as the receiver of the calls, they're calling. They're calling, and
I only bring it up because they seem like the smallest numbers on the list, but they're the biggest impact to a lot of people.
thank you.
This isn't the end of the discussion with the school committee or about the school budget. Betty, would you mind taking just a minute to say what some of the next steps are with the subcommittee and what we're going to do?
Well, we'll probably have another meeting, and I don't exactly know with the holidays coming, we should probably wait till after the holidays, but typically if people have a chance to review this budget in more detail now, and if you have particular questions, you can send them to me, and then I usually send them to Glenn and Mary, and then they get back to us with their answers. And then we'll have another meeting, probably January sometime. Last year it was on a snow day, so we got to come in early. But, So if you want to, we can, I haven't planned a time, but I'll certainly be in touch and figure out what would be a good time to have next meeting.
Great.
And anybody who would like to come is certainly welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much, really appreciated it. Anybody else have any other business they wanted to discuss?
Motion to adjourn?
All those in favor? We are adjourned.
Oh.